Welcome to Finding Yourself with Kristopher Dahir, proudly sponsored by Lighthouse Coffee in Sparks, Nevada. Now let's join Kristopher for today's message.
Hello, this is Kristopher Dahir with Finding Yourself. Thanks for joining us again. And we just finished a conversation, and this is kind of ongoing. We're going to hit a few things on just ending our conversation about conflict resolution. We went through the definitions. We hit on the three things just to get you ready. And I'll just say them real quick again. Clean your own glasses, look at your own life, that kind of thing. Know your perspective. You have one. Other people have their own. And then also value yourself and others. Find ways to do those three things, and I'm telling you, you'll be ready for conflict in a way you've never realized. Then, let's say all of a sudden there's conflict, okay? This conflict, you got to stop and determine the source. Now, it's almost like the idea of all of a sudden you hear this big pots and pans go off and you don't know where that noise came from. You can't just start yelling at whoever's in the room. You have no idea where this conflict is. So many times I see people just get mad. And the reason they get mad a lot of times is because they're kind of wound up and they're angry anyway. And all of a sudden this bang goes over here, or seems like someone runs into them over here, and they're just angry. They're just like loaded and ready to go. If you find yourself in that spot, I'm going to tell you, take a vacation, take a little pause. You need to calm down. And I know that you don't know me, or you do know me, and you say, wow, who's this guy to tell me to calm down? I'm a guy that's walking by saying, you know what, I value you enough that you got to take a breath. If you're wound up and you find yourself angry all the time, give me a call. We'll sit down and have some coaching time, because it's important that you find a way to walk in life where you're not ready to just go off at every moment. Okay, with that said, determine the source. You better know what you're focusing in on, or it might not even be your conflict. It might even be your business. It might be just something that made noise. So make sure that it's truly a conflict before you ever step in. And then, here's the big one, listen. You've already cleaned your glasses, you already know your perspective, you've already valued others, these things are already in place, and then you're just going to listen. I know this is hard because we live in a time where it seems that reacting is the right way to go. We have leaders who react, and again, I'm not picking on any political party, I'm really not. But bottom line, if people are reacting instead of responding, that is not a good principle to live by. And so with that said, if you find yourself at a place where you are not responding, and what responding means is you slow down, you listen, and then you make decisions based upon principles. That's what leadership is. And that's what I've known it to be, at least. That's how I define it. And so as we walk forward, these things are crucial. And so as you have those principles in place, we can make a difference. That's what I want to celebrate in leaders. If you're just reacting all the time, you're going to find that you hurt people that you never meant to. And matter of fact, you hurt yourself. Hopefully you never want to hurt anybody, but when you just pop off and you just go, you find yourself making more damage than ever needed. And so listen so you can respond. Active listening is the words they use right now a lot of times. Active listening, some of the skills for that, and we'll probably do a whole podcast just on active listening, but some of that means that you really you look at them, you make sure you're not looking at your phone, you make sure you're not thinking of other things. You even repeat to them what they said so you know that they know that you heard them and that they understand, that you understand. Those kind of things are active listening. Next thing you do is you decide if it's worth talking about. Not every time someone bumps into you is it worth a conversation. And I know we live in a time that doesn't seem true. Like I watch people right now all the time just waiting for some conflict to hit so they can step up and bump chests or do whatever. I just challenge you to make sure that it's worth it. You know, sometimes people are just having a bad day and they just had a bad day. Don't make your bad day just because they had a bad day doesn't mean you need to. So kind of decide who they are and what they are, and is it worth the time of going through all these steps? Maybe it doesn't matter. And I'm not saying avoiding conflict, but I'm determining that is this conflict worthwhile? If someone I don't even know comes up and says something, I can just wave my hand at them and say, that's cool. God bless you, my friend. I don't know who you are and I don't know what it's about. However, if I have a close friend like my friend Michael who came up to me and said, I'm really mad at you, I would stop and slow down because he means a lot to me. So there's a difference in those things. And so just know, and even with that, if you're going to still determine how important these things are and how to slow down and make sure that you're really looking at them. The other thing is make sure they're not tied to other things. And what I mean by that is, when we walk into conflict, let's say I woke up that day on the wrong side of the bed. My toothbrush that's usually ready to charge to brush my teeth and vibrate and do all that stuff is dead. I turned around, the coffee worker doesn't work right, my wife gave me a sneer, and all of a sudden I walk into work and my boss says, hey, I need to talk to you, and then all of a sudden I'm like, right? Well, there's a good chance my response at that moment may have nothing to do with my boss. It might not even have anything to do with my wife. It might have everything to do with my toothbrush. It might have anything to do with my pillows weren't fluffed right. So just make sure when you're going to step into those things that you're not bringing something that has nothing to do with that. Maybe it's not really conflict at all. You're just in a bad mood. They're just in a bad mood. So just slow down. And no, it doesn't mean there can't be conversation around those things, but don't waste the time. And we're going to talk in a minute about that account balance, but don't waste the account balance on those kind of things. Now, a couple other things I just want to talk about real quick. When you're in the middle of this, so we decided we're having conflict. You and I are having conflict. We care for each other. We cleaned our own glasses. I know you have a perspective. You know I have one. We value each other, but we aren't seeing eye to eye. And what's going to end up happening here is we're going to agree to have this conversation. But I'm going to stop and listen to your perspective, but also they need to listen to my perspective. Hear this. You're not really having conflict resolution if they're not willing to listen to you as well. Now, I know that might sound interesting, like, wait a minute, that you said it's all on you. You're right. How I treat people is on me. But why am I going to sit down and waste my time in this whole thing if you're not going to listen to a word I say? Now, with that said, when that happens, and it does happen, I'll just say, you know what? I appreciate our conversation. I don't think we're going to get very far because you're not even listening to me. And so I respect you enough to value you, and I heard what you said, but I need you to respect me as well. And I've actually said those exact words to people. And some people have said, well, I don't value you, and I don't want to hear what you have to say. And I say, well, this conversation's done. Now, you said, I thought everyone could get along. They can, but that means both groups need to want to get along. And if both groups don't want to come to the table and have those conversations, then it's not going to happen. And those are people, there are people in my life that I still value, but I won't work with, and I wouldn't go on vacation with them, and I wouldn't invite them to dinner, and I wouldn't hang out with them. And it's not because they're bad people. They don't value me like I value them. And that's really the bottom line. And if they did, then it wouldn't matter what we agreed or disagreed on because they're willing to listen. So just catch that again. If you get to a place where you're sitting here having this, and you get to this place where they shared their opinion and you listened, and they're not willing to listen, have the conversation. Say, you know what? I heard you and I'm listening, and you have my full attention, but I need to share with you what I see. It's different. And they say, I don't care what you see. That tells you what you need to know right there. The rest of the steps I'm about to talk about, they're not going to happen. You're not going to find a pathway forward unless you disappear. And I'm telling you this, I value myself enough that I will not disappear. I value myself enough to say, you know what? I think there's a decision being made here. When you want to listen to what I have to say, let's come back together and have that conversation. Next thing I want to encourage you, determine if the way forward is collaborative or you're going to compromise. Now, we've already decided we're not running from it. I'm not here trying to discard what you have to say. We already decided we're going to hack this healthily. But even with that said, it doesn't mean we can always compromise. Sometimes we're going to have to collaborate. Let me remind you what these two things are. Compromising is the idea that you can put two things together, blend them. So if we have something that's, black and white, and we put it together, we have gray, and we were able to compromise because it was close enough, and I'm okay with that. I didn't have to compromise my beliefs, and we were able to compromise the conversation in a way that, it's a flyer that went out and it looks kind of what I did and you did. But sometimes there's times you can't compromise because it has to do with your core principles. And with that said, if that's the case, then you're going to have to collaborate, which means you find common ground. There's pieces that I will not move on. and we're going to have that conversation. And so if you don't know what that means, you got to go back and listen to some of our earlier podcasts. We really go through them quite a bit, but I'll just challenge you. Those are 2 words to really think about and study and read about her. Again, my podcast goes into some of them, but there's some great books out there as well and some great theories on that. Again, if you really can't find a way forward, even after all this is done, but you're both willing to sit at the table, get a third party. This sounds interesting. You're like, what? I thought you said there's always a way forward. There is, but there's sometimes that you and me can't see it without somebody else showing it to us. Maybe somebody else can come in. And I've been through counseling before with my wife, with other people, and there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't make you weak. It makes you strong. You know, when my wife and I had our times where we couldn't see eye to eye, it wasn't that I devalued her or she devalued me. It's just that I couldn't see it. All of a sudden, we have a third party saying, hey, have you thought about this? Now, I don't always think I liked what they had to say because I'm all, but there was a way forward, and that counselor helped us get there. A third party is a good idea. Here's a couple diffusing tips, then I'll be done with this piece, and then we're going to move on to one other conversation about conflict, and that has to do with accounts. But it's interesting you understand this. Here's some ways to some diffusing tips to conflict. Just real quick, these are extra for you. Listen. Listen to people. I know we keep saying that, but if you have anything you learned out of this, be a listener. Manage your own issues. Don't bring new issues to the table. Make sure it's the right time to have the conversation. Big deal. Sometimes people want to have these conversations right when someone walks in the door, when the big thing's going on. The other thing is be honest. If you're going to have this conversation, don't sit here and lie. You got to be honest. Even if the other person doesn't like what you have to say, your job is just to share what you see. Doesn't mean you're right. Doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means this is what I see. And then this final thing here is show empathy. Now, this word empathy today, people think it, I even read it in the dictionary. It means that I understand how you feel. Well, I think it's a bad definition because I'm never going to understand how you feel. But it means I can respect it. I can respect you. I can have empathy for you, and I can say, you know what, I can tell you're hurting. I can't understand it. Even if you went through the same thing I went through, you're not me. So with that, we're at Lighthouse Coffee. I appreciate these guys allowing us to come together here. They are sponsors of this. If you ever want to grab a cup of coffee and sit down and talk about some of these things, this is where I'd come. Many blessings to you. Thank you for joining Finding Your South. See you on the next podcast.